The grand mansion glowed under 1,000 golden lights, standing tall like a palace on the edge of the city. Inside, laughter echoed through the marble halls as music played softly. Expensive wine flowed, and men in suits talked about deals worth more than most people could imagine. Victor Hale, the billionaire host, stood at the center of it all, smiling proudly. He was a man used to getting attention, tall, charming, and always surrounded by people who wanted to please him. In one corner of the massive living room, the household staff moved quietly, making sure every guest had what they needed. Among them was Maria, Victor's maid. She had worked for him for over 15 years, cleaning the mansion, serving guests, and keeping everything perfect. Maria was known for her gentle nature and hard-working spirit. She had raised her daughter, Elena, alone after her husband passed away. Money had always been tight, but she had never let her struggles show at work. That night, Maria had brought Elena with her. The girl was 17, shy, curious, and beautiful in a simple way. Her long brown hair was tied neatly, and her big eyes looked around the glittering room in awe. She had never seen so many rich people in one place, wearing designer clothes and diamonds that sparkled like stars. Maria had begged Victor to let her bring Elena just for that evening, since she had no one to watch her at home. Victor had agreed, not out of kindness, but because he didn't care either way. Elena stood quietly near the buffet table. Holding a glass of juice, she tried not to get in anyone's way, but she couldn't help glancing toward the group of people laughing near the piano. They were all watching a few guests dance, slow, graceful movements to the rhythm of a jazz tune. Elena loved dancing ever since she was a little girl. It made her forget everything: the bills, the small apartment, her mother's tired eyes. She would dance in her room when no one was watching. Imagining herself on a real stage, Victor noticed her from across the room. He had been drinking and his mood was light. The sight of the maid's daughter quietly watching his guests amused him. He walked over with a few friends, smiling in that half-serious, half-teasing way rich men sometimes do when they feel powerful. "Hey," he said loudly, making Elena look up. "You like dancing, don't you?" Elena froze, unsure what to say. Maria, who was serving drinks nearby, turned pale. She quickly stepped forward. "Sir, please, she's just—" But Victor interrupted with a laugh. "Relax, Maria. I'm not angry." He turned back to the girl. "Tell you what, why don't you dance for us? Right here, right now." The guests around him chuckled, one woman whispering to another. Elena's cheeks burned red. She wanted to disappear. Her hands trembled as she held the glass tighter. Maria whispered, "Elena, don't. Please just stay quiet." But Victor wasn't done. He raised his glass and smirked. "Come on, show us what you've got." "If you can dance to this song," he said as the DJ switched to a fast, complicated beat, "I'll give you $100 million. Laughter broke out around the room. The guests thought it was a joke, a rich man's silly game, but to Elena it didn't feel funny. The challenge stung like a slap. She knew he was mocking her, reminding her of who she was, a maid's daughter in a world that didn't belong to her. Maria's eyes filled with tears. She whispered again, "Don't do it, honey." But Elena looked up at Victor. Her heart pounded in her chest and something inside her shifted. Maybe it was anger, maybe pride, or maybe the years of being invisible. Whatever it was, she suddenly felt brave. The room quieted as she stepped forward. Her small figure seemed out of place in the center of that elegant room. Victor raised an eyebrow, surprised that she had actually accepted the challenge. The guests stopped laughing and leaned closer. Curious, the music started again, loud, wild, and full of energy. For a moment, Elena closed her eyes. The rhythm filled her body, and she remembered all those nights she had danced barefoot in their tiny living room. Pretending she was on stage, she took a deep breath, lifted her head, and began to move. The laughter faded as she spun gracefully, her movements sharp yet full of feeling. The billionaire's smile slowly disappeared, and the crowd's smirks turned into silent stares. Every step she took seemed to tell a story of struggle, strength, and dreams that refused to die. Maria stood frozen, her hands shaking as she watched her daughter move like the music itself. For the first time in that grand mansion, something real was happening, something that money couldn't buy. When the final beat ended, the room stayed silent. No one dared to speak. Elena stood still, breathing hard, her eyes glistening. And for a long second, even Victor Hale, the man who thought he owned the world, couldn't find his voice. That night had begun as just another party for the rich. But in that single moment, it became something no one would forget. It was the night a billionaire mocked a maid's daughter and ended up speechless before her courage. The room was still filled with the echo of silence after Elena's dance. Everyone's eyes were on her, the maid's daughter who had just stunned a room full of millionaires. Victor Hale stood motionless for a moment, his usual smirk gone. He tried to speak, but no words came out. A part of him wanted to laugh it off, to turn it into another rich man's joke. But something in Elena's eyes stopped him. The silence broke when one of the guests clapped awkwardly, then another joined, and soon the entire hall was filled with thunderous applause. Elena's face flushed with shock and confusion. She had never stood in front of such people before, never been noticed, never been admired. Maria, her mother, covered her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks. She couldn't believe what had just happened. Victor forced a laugh and said, "Well, I wasn't serious about the money." Of course, trying to regain control of the moment, the guests laughed lightly, but it was nervous laughter. They could feel the tension hanging in the air. Elena didn't say anything. She just looked down, her hands trembling. She hadn't danced for money or attention. She had danced because something deep inside told her not to let anyone mock her mother or her worth. As the party slowly returned to its usual rhythm, Victor's guests whispered among themselves. Some praised Elena's courage, while others joked about the maid's daughter who outshone the ballroom. But Victor wasn't listening. His mind kept replaying the image of her movements, raw, emotional, almost too real for a place like his mansion. After everyone left, Maria quietly gathered empty glasses, her head lowered. She wanted to get out of that house as soon as possible. She didn't want trouble. Victor approached her, still holding his drink. "You didn't tell me your daughter could dance like that," he said softly. Maria hesitated. She dances at home sometimes, sir. It's nothing special." Her voice was low, full of fear. Victor nodded but didn't look convinced. "Nothing special?" he murmured. "That didn't look like nothing to me." Then he walked away, leaving Maria both confused and uneasy. She didn't know if he was impressed, angry, or planning something she couldn't predict. The next morning, Maria and Elena returned to their small apartment on the city's edge. It was tiny, with cracked walls and an old sofa that had seen better days. The glow of last night felt like a dream, but not a pleasant one. "You shouldn't have done that," Maria said finally as she placed a cup of tea on the table. "You shouldn't have challenged a man like him." Elena looked at her mother with tired eyes. "He humiliated us, Mom. He laughed at me, at you. I couldn't just stand there." Her voice trembled slightly. "I didn't dance for him, I danced for us," Maria sighed, sitting beside her. "I know, sweetheart, but rich people don't like being challenged. Sometimes pride can cost more than money." The room was still filled with the echo of silence after Elena's dance. Everyone's eyes were on her, the maid's daughter who had just stunned a room full of millionaires. Victor Hale stood motionless for a moment, his usual smirk gone. He tried to speak, but no words came out. A part of him wanted to laugh it off, to turn it into another rich man's joke. But something in Elena's eyes stopped him. The silence broke when one of the guests clapped awkwardly, then another joined, and soon the entire hall was filled with thunderous applause. Elena's face flushed with shock and confusion. She had never stood in front of such people before, never been noticed, never been admired. Maria, her mother, covered her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks. She couldn't believe what had just happened. Victor forced a laugh and said, "Well, I wasn't serious about the money." Of course, trying to regain control of the moment, the guests laughed lightly, but it was nervous laughter. They could feel the tension hanging in the air. Elena didn't say anything. She just looked down, her hands trembling. She hadn't danced for money or attention. She had danced because something deep inside told her not to let anyone mock her mother or her worth. As the party slowly returned to its usual rhythm, Victor's guests whispered among themselves. Some praised Elena's courage, while others joked about the maid's daughter who outshone the ballroom. But Victor wasn't listening. His mind kept replaying the image of her movements, raw, emotional, almost too real for a place like his mansion. After everyone left, Maria quietly gathered empty glasses, her head lowered. She wanted to get out of that house as soon as possible. She didn't want trouble. Victor approached her, still holding his drink. "You didn't tell me your daughter could dance like that," he said softly. Maria hesitated. She dances at home sometimes, sir. It's nothing special." Her voice was low, full of fear. Victor nodded but didn't look convinced. "Nothing special," he murmured. "That didn't look like nothing to me." Then he walked away, leaving Maria both confused and uneasy. She didn't know if he was impressed, angry, or planning something she couldn't predict. The next morning, Maria and Elena returned to their small apartment on the city's edge. It was tiny, with cracked walls and an old sofa that had seen better days. The glow of last night felt like a dream, but not a pleasant one. "You shouldn't have done that," Maria said finally as she placed a cup of tea on the table. "You shouldn't have challenged a man like him." Elena looked at her mother with tired eyes. "He humiliated us, Mom. He laughed at me, at you." "I couldn't just stand there." Her voice trembled slightly. "I didn't dance for him, I danced for us," Maria sighed, sitting beside her. "I know, sweetheart, but rich people don't like being challenged. Sometimes pride can cost more than money." Meanwhile, back in the mansion, Victor couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. He had built his empire from charm, ambition, and power. But watching that girl dance had reminded him of something he had long forgotten. Sincerity, passion, and truth. Those things didn't exist in his world anymore. His friends were polished masks, his laughter was rehearsed, and his success had become a habit, not a joy. But that girl, she had danced with her soul, and for a moment, she had made him feel something real. He asked his assistant to find out about Maria and her daughter. Within hours he knew everything: where they lived, Elena's school, her grades, and even that she had been offered a scholarship once but couldn't afford the expenses to accept it. Victor sat in silence, tapping his fingers on the desk. He wasn't sure why he cared. Maybe it was guilt or curiosity, or something more, admiration. 2 days later, Maria received a call from Victor's office. The voice on the line was polite but firm. "Mr. Hale would like to see you and your daughter this evening." Maria froze, her heart pounding. "Did something happen?" she asked. "No, ma'am," the assistant replied. "He just wants to talk." When they arrived, Victor greeted them personally, a rare gesture. He wasn't smiling arrogantly this time. "Elena," he said, "you have a rare gift, do you know that?" Elena looked at him cautiously, unsure how to respond. "I don't know, sir. I just dance because I love it," Victor nodded, then poured himself a drink. "Love," he repeated softly. "That's a word I don't hear often in my world." He turned toward her and said, "I want to help you. I have connections in performing arts. Schools, training academies. You deserve a real chance." Maria immediately shook her head. "Sir, please, we can't accept that. I don't want my daughter to owe anyone anything." Victor raised his hand gently. "Maria, it's not charity, it's respect." For the first time, Maria saw something different in his face, not pity, but genuine sincerity. After a long pause, she nodded, tears welling up again. "Thank you, sir." That night, as they left the mansion, the cool air brushed against their faces. Elena looked up at the stars, her heart full of hope and disbelief. Her mother held her hand tightly, whispering, "Maybe this time, life is finally changing for us." And somewhere behind them, standing by the tall glass window of his grand home, Victor Hale watched them walk away, a thoughtful look in his eyes. He didn't know why that girl had affected him so deeply, but he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't laughing anymore. The morning sun painted the city in soft gold, but for Maria and Elena it still felt like a dream. They sat together in their small kitchen, sipping tea from chipped cups. The night before had changed everything, yet it didn't feel real. Victor Hale, the billionaire who once mocked them, had offered to help. Maria kept replaying his words in her head, unsure if she should trust them. She had worked for him long enough to know that rich people could change their minds as quickly as they changed their suits. Elena, on the other hand, felt something different. For the first time in her life, she felt seen, truly seen. She wasn't just the maid's daughter anymore. She was the girl who had made the billionaire speechless. "Mom," she said quietly, "what if he really means it? What if he helps me get into a real dance school?" Maria smiled sadly. "I want to believe that too, sweetheart, but people like him, they don't usually care about people like us." But Elena had a spark in her eyes that morning. The kind of spark Maria hadn't seen since her husband passed away. She had always known her daughter had something special inside her, a fire that refused to die no matter how hard life became. Maybe, just maybe, this was the moment that fire was meant to shine. Later that week, a car arrived outside their apartment. A man in a neat black suit stepped out and introduced himself as Mr. Gray. Victor Hale's personal assistant, Miss Elena. Mr. Hale has arranged an appointment for you, he said politely, handing her an envelope. Inside was an official invitation from the prestigious Lincoln Arts Academy, one of the best performing art schools in the country. Elena gasped as she read it. Maria covered her mouth in shock. He actually did it, Maria whispered, her voice trembling. He really did, Elena said, smiling through tears. She didn't know whether to cry or laugh. Mr. Gray explained that Victor had paid for her full tuition, living expenses, and even dance equipment. Mr. Hale said talent should never be wasted, he added before leaving. The next few days passed like a blur. Elena prepared for her new life with nervous excitement. Maria helped her pack, folding each piece of clothing carefully as if she were sending a part of her heart away. Promise me one thing, Maria said softly, holding Elena's hand. No matter how big your dreams get, never forget where you came from. Elena hugged her tightly, whispering, I'll never forget, Mom. I promise. When Elena arrived at Lincoln Academy, it felt like stepping into another world. The campus was enormous, polished floors, grand halls, and students from wealthy families who had been training since childhood. She felt out of place the moment she walked in. Her clothes were simple, her shoes worn, and she didn't know anyone still. When the music began in her first dance class, she closed her eyes and let her heart guide her. At first, the other students whispered about her. She's the girl the billionaire sponsored, one said. Probably a charity case, another laughed quietly. Elena tried to ignore them, but the words stung. She knew she didn't belong in their world, but she also knew she wasn't going to give up. Every night after class, she stayed behind, practicing alone until her feet ached. She remembered her mother's tired face and Victor Hale's surprised expression. Those images pushed her to work harder. Her movements became sharper, stronger, filled with emotion that no fancy training could teach. Slowly, the same students who once laughed began to watch in silence. Some even started asking for her help. Meanwhile, Victor kept track of her progress through Mr. Gray. He didn't visit the academy himself, but every report he received made him prouder. There was something pure about Elena's determination that reminded him of the man he used to be, before money hardened his heart. He found himself talking about her to friends, saying, You know that girl I told you about? She's going to be a star. But not everyone shared his enthusiasm. One evening at a dinner party, a business partner sneered, So you're playing fairy godfather now? Helping Maid's daughters dance their way into high society? Victor's smile faded. I'm helping talent, he replied coldly. Something money can't buy. Back at the academy, months passed, and Elena grew into one of the most talented dancers in the school. Her instructors praised her passion, saying it came from a place they rarely saw in others. One day, the academy announced a major showcase, an event attended by top producers, directors, and investors. The best student performances could lead to international opportunities. Elena signed up immediately. Her instructor warned her it would be tough, but she was ready. Every night she practiced until the lights went out. She wanted to make her mother proud, to prove that her life was worth more than people's judgments. The night of the showcase arrived. The auditorium was filled with hundreds of people, and to Elena's surprise, sitting in the front row was Victor Hale himself, dressed in a black suit. His eyes calm but proud, Maria sat beside him, holding her purse nervously. When the lights dimmed and Elena stepped on stage, a wave of emotion rushed through her. The music began, the same song Victor had chosen months ago, the one that started it all. She smiled faintly and began to dance. Every movement carried a story, from poverty to hope. From pain to strength, the audience sat spellbound, not blinking, not breathing, as if afraid to break the moment. When the final note faded, there was silence, and then an explosion of applause. Victor stood up slowly, his hands clapping, his expression unreadable. But inside, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Pride mixed with humility. He realized that the girl he once mocked had given him back something priceless, a sense of humanity. That night, as Elena bowed on stage, she looked out into the crowd and saw her mother smiling through tears. And for the first time, she truly believed that dreams could rise from the unlikeliest places, even from the floors of a billionaire's mansion. The audience was still cheering when Elena stepped off the stage. Her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her fingertips. Sweat glistened on her face, but she didn't care for the first time. She wasn't just the maid's daughter, she was Elena, the girl who had danced her way into the world's heart. Backstage, her fellow dancers hugged her, some with genuine joy, others with quiet envy. She smiled at all of them, grateful, overwhelmed, and almost dizzy with disbelief. When she stepped into the hallway, she saw her mother waiting. Maria's eyes were red from crying. She ran forward and pulled Elena into a tight hug. "You did it, sweetheart," she whispered. "You did it." Elena laughed through tears. "Mom, I was so scared." Maria shook her head. "You were perfect," her voice trembled. "I've never been prouder in my life." A few minutes later, a man approached them, a tall, wearing a crisp suit. "Miss Elena?" he asked, extending a card. "I'm from the Royal Dance Conservatory in London. We were very impressed tonight. We'd like to offer you a spot in our international program." Elena froze, staring at the card as if it were made of gold. "London?" she repeated. The man smiled. "Yes, full scholarship, including travel and housing." Maria covered her mouth in shock. "Oh my God, Elena," she whispered. Elena turned to Victor, who was standing a few feet away, watching quietly. For a long moment, their eyes met. His expression was calm, but his eyes were shining. "Take it," he said softly. "Don't let anything hold you back." Later that night, as the crowd dispersed and the lights dimmed, Victor found himself alone in the auditorium. He sat in the front row staring at the empty stage, remembering the first night he'd seen her dance, the night he had mocked her. How foolish he had been. That moment had changed not only her life but his too. He had always believed that money was power, that success came from control. But Elena had taught him something no business deal ever could, that true greatness came from heart. He had built his empire on numbers and pride, but she had built her world on hope and courage, and somehow she was richer for it. Meanwhile, at home, Maria sat by the window, holding the scholarship letter in her hands. The street outside was quiet, but her mind was racing. She had always dreamed of giving her daughter a better life. But now that it was finally happening, she was terrified. "London," she whispered to herself. "That's so far away." Elena walked in and knelt beside her. "Mom, I know it's scary, but this is everything we've ever hoped for." Maria smiled faintly. "I know, my love. I just wish your father could see this." She looked up at the ceiling, as if speaking to him. He'd be so proud. Elena hugged her tightly. "I'll make you both proud, I promise." The next few weeks passed in a blur. Elena prepared for her journey, packing her dreams into a single suitcase. Maria helped her with every little thing, even though her heart ached with every folded dress and sealed bag. On the day of departure, Victor sent a car to take them to the airport. At the terminal, Elena turned to him. "I don't even know how to thank you," she said sincerely. Victor shook his head. "Don't thank me," he replied. "Just promise me one thing and stay true to yourself, no matter how big the world gets." She smiled. "I will." Maria hugged Victor before leaving, something she never thought she'd do. "You changed our lives, sir," she said quietly. "You saw something in my daughter that even I didn't see fully." Victor's voice softened. "She changed mine first." When the plane took off, Elena looked out the window, watching the city fade beneath the clouds. She thought of her mother, of their tiny apartment, of all the nights she danced barefoot in the dark. And somewhere down below, in a mansion filled with empty luxury, Victor stood by the glass wall looking up at the sky, a faint smile crossing his face. Months passed, and Elena's life in London was nothing like she had imagined. The conservatory was beautiful but demanding. The dancers were talented, fierce, and disciplined. She felt like a small fish in a vast ocean. Many of the students came from wealthy families, girls who had been training since childhood in world-famous studios. They looked at Elena's simple clothes and quiet demeanor with curiosity. But once the music started, everything changed. Elena danced with her heart, not her status. Her movements spoke louder than any background or wealth. In just a few months, she became one of the most talked-about students in the program. Her instructors called her a rare soul in motion. One evening, after a long practice, she received a message from Victor. It was short but heartfelt. "I watched your performance video. You're becoming everything I knew you could be." "Don't stop now," she smiled, typing back. "Thank you for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself." Back in her small dorm room, she looked at the window and whispered, "One day I'll make enough to bring Mom here. We'll never struggle again." Meanwhile, in his mansion, Victor began visiting community centers and local schools. He started sponsoring young talents from poor backgrounds, quietly, without cameras or interviews. Each time he saw a spark in someone's eyes, he remembered that night. The night the maid's daughter had shown him what true power looked like. Elena's name began appearing in dance magazines and online articles. People called her the miracle from nowhere. She didn't mind the nickname, she wore it with pride, because she knew exactly where she came from. And every time she stepped on stage, she carried her mother's love, her father's memory, and the echo of that billionaire's challenge that had once been a joke, but had turned into the key to her destiny. Her story wasn't about wealth or fame, and it was about courage, heart, and the beautiful irony of life where one cruel laugh had unknowingly created a legend. The night of Elena's London debut arrived like a dream wrapped in nerves. The Royal Opera House shimmered beneath 1,000 lights, and a quiet drizzle painted the city streets silver. Inside, the air buzzed with excitement. Journalists, art critics, and dance lovers from all over Europe had gathered to see the young woman whose name had been whispered for months. Elena Cruz, the girl who danced her way from poverty to the world stage. Backstage, Elena stood before a tall mirror, her reflection almost unrecognizable. She was no longer the timid girl who once stood barefoot in a billionaire's mansion. She was poised, elegant, and ready. Her hair was tied neatly, her costume flowing like silk clouds. Yet behind the calmness, her heart raced. She thought of her mother sitting somewhere in the front rows, wearing her best dress, the same one she'd worn for church on special Sundays. The curtain call was minutes away. Her dance teacher, Madame Laurent, walked up to her. "Remember, Elena," she said softly in her thick French accent. "Technique can move the eyes, but emotion moves the soul." Elena nodded, taking a deep breath. She had learned that lesson long before she ever entered a professional studio. When the lights dimmed, the world outside faded, and the music began. Elena stepped into the spotlight. Each movement she made was a memory come alive. Her dance told a story rare of struggle, love, loss, and hope, of a mother's sacrifice and a dream born in the corners of a mansion where she never belonged. The audience sat frozen, their eyes wide, as her body flowed like poetry. Her performance wasn't perfect in a technical sense, but it was alive. Every leap, every turn, every fall carried a heartbeat. By the time the music ended, the theater was wrapped in silence. The kind of silence that comes when words aren't enough. Then suddenly applause roared through the room. People stood, clapping, cheering, shouting her name. Maria stood among them, tears running down her face, whispering, "That's my daughter," over and over again. In that moment, all the years of cleaning floors and skipping meals didn't matter anymore. Her child had turned pain into art, and the world had bowed to it. Victor Hale was there too, sitting a few seats away from Maria. He hadn't told her he was coming. He watched quietly, his eyes reflecting the stage lights. When Elena bowed, their eyes met, and for a brief second, she smiled. A silent thank you for the man who once dared her to dance. He clapped too. But there was something in his applause that was different from everyone else's. Not pride, not amusement, but awe. After the show, reporters swarmed the backstage area. Photographers begged for pictures. Critics called her the heart of humanity, saying her dance had reminded people of why art mattered. Elena smiled humbly, giving short, sincere answers. "I'm just grateful," she said. "My mother always taught me that dreams don't belong to the rich, they belong to the brave." When the crowd thinned out, Victor finally approached her. He looked older than before, not in a tired way, but in a human way. "You did it," he said simply. Elena laughed softly. "You started it," she replied. "I wouldn't be here without that night." Victor shook his head. "You would have found your way, Elena. You had something inside you that the world was bound to see." They stood there for a moment, not as billionaire and Maid's daughter, but as two people who had changed each other's lives. "You know," Victor said after a pause, "when I made that joke years ago, I thought I was being clever. Turns out, I was just blind." Elena smiled kindly. "Sometimes it takes light from someone else to open our eyes." Outside the theater, the rain had stopped. The city glowed beneath the street lamps. Victor offered to drive Maria and Elena back to their hotel. During the ride, Maria looked out the window, silent for a long while. Then she said, "I used to pray for a miracle. I didn't know my miracle would come in the form of my daughter's courage." Victor smiled faintly. "And her mother's strength," he added the next morning. Headlines across Europe carried Elena's story. From Maid's daughter to international star, the dance that humbled a billionaire, her journey became a symbol of hope for countless others who had been told they weren't enough. Interviews flooded in, offers from global dance companies poured through her agent, but Elena stayed grounded. She always began every interview by mentioning her mother and the man who once challenged her. Months later, she was invited to perform at a charity gala, hosted by none other than Victor Hale himself. The event raised funds for young, underprivileged artists just like she once was. As she took the stage again, she noticed the large banner that read, "The Elena Foundation, founded by Victor Hale." Her heart swelled. She danced again, this time not for herself, but for every child who had a dream too big for their circumstances. As the music filled the hall, she saw Maria in the crowd sitting next to Victor, both of them smiling. And in that moment, Elena realized the true power of her story. It wasn't about fame or fortune. It was about transformation, about how a cruel joke had become a spark, how arrogance had turned into kindness, and how a girl with nothing had taught the world that grace could come from anywhere. When the final curtain fell, Elena bowed deeply, tears glimmering in her eyes. The applause rose once again, long and thunderous somewhere in the audience. Victor whispered to Maria, "I promised 100 million that night. I didn't give her the money, but I think she's earned something far more valuable." Maria smiled through her tears. "Yes," she said softly, "she's earned the world." And as Elena stood there, bathed in the golden light of the stage, she knew that her story wasn't just hers anymore. It belonged to everyone who had ever been laughed at, underestimated or forgotten. It was proof that no matter where you start, the rhythm of your heart can take you anywhere. Weeks after the charity gala, Elena's life moved faster than she ever imagined. Every newspaper and online platform spoke her name. She was called the girl who danced for a billionaire and won the world. The once small, quiet girl who cleaned marble floors alongside her mother was now a symbol of courage and grace. But fame, Elena quickly learned, came with both light and shadows. Every morning, reporters waited outside her apartment, snapping pictures whenever she stepped out. Some wanted to celebrate her story. Others wanted to twist it. They whispered rumors about her connection to Victor Hale, suggesting things that weren't true. Elena ignored them at first, but deep down it hurt. She had worked so hard to prove herself, yet the world seemed more interested in her relationship with the billionaire than in her talent. One morning, as she was preparing for rehearsal, her mother Maria placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Let them talk," she said softly. "They don't know your heart. You do." Elena nodded, though her chest felt heavy. She missed the quiet days when it was just her and her mother dreaming in their tiny apartment. Fame had taken away her silence and replaced it with noise. At the dance studio, Elena poured her frustration into her movements. Every spin, every leap, every breath carried her fight to stay true to herself. Madame Laurent watched quietly from the corner, noticing the storm inside her student. After the music stopped, she approached and said, "You must remember, ma chère, the world will always talk. But art, true art, speaks louder than gossip. You must keep dancing for the reason you began, not for the ones who watch." That night, Elena received a call from Victor. "You're trending again," he said, half jokingly, half concerned.
"Apparently people think we're secretly planning another performance." She laughed tiredly.
"Let them think what they want. I'm just trying to dance." Victor's voice softened. "Elena, don't let their noise dim your light. The higher you rise, the louder they'll shout. It's the price of standing above the crowd." She was silent for a moment. "Sometimes I wish I could go back," she admitted, "to when no one knew me." Victor chuckled quietly. "No, you don't, because that girl wanted the world to hear her, and now it does." His words stuck with her long after the call ended. A few weeks later, Elena received an invitation to perform at the World Ballet Championship in Paris, the biggest stage of her career. Dancers from over 30 countries would compete, each one the best of their nation. It was an opportunity that could define her legacy, but with it came pressure. Sponsors wanted her to win, fans expected her to dominate, and critics waited to see if her fame was stronger than her talent. As the event drew near, Elena practiced harder than ever before. Some nights she fell asleep on the studio floor, too tired to walk home. Her feet blistered, her muscles screamed, but she refused to stop. Maria often brought her food and whispered prayers under her breath, watching her daughter push herself beyond exhaustion. Finally, the night arrived. The stage in Paris shimmered like a dream. The audience was full. Producers, royal guests, and even Victor Hale seated quietly in the front row. When Elena stepped onto the stage, her heart pounded, but her face showed calm determination. The lights dimmed. The music began. Her performance was unlike anything the world had ever seen. She combined the precision of classical ballet with the emotional rawness of contemporary movement. Every motion told a story, of struggle, of laughter, of a girl once mocked who now made the world bow in silence. The crowd barely breathed as she moved. At one point she fell to her knees, her arms reaching upward, as if dancing against the weight of her past. It wasn't in the choreography. It came from her heart. That moment became the soul of the performance. When she finished, there was a heartbeat of silence, then an explosion of applause so loud it shook the hall. Tears streamed down her face as she bowed. She didn't know yet, but that night would change everything again. Backstage, judges rushed to congratulate her. The head of the committee announced that she had not only won the championship, but had received the highest score in its history. Reporters swarmed her with microphones, shouting questions. But Elena didn't speak much. She simply said, "This isn't just my victory. It's my mother's. It's for every person who was ever laughed at but never gave up." Victor approached her later, a proud smile on his face. "I've invested in 1,000 things," he said softly, "but none of them have given me this kind of return." Elena smiled, shaking her head. "You didn't invest, Mr. Hale, you believed," he laughed. "Fair enough," then he paused. "But now that the world knows your name, what will you do next?" She looked around at the lights, the fans, the chaos, and then back at him. "I'll dance," she said. "Not for fame, not for money. For the girl who once danced barefoot in your mansion." Victor's smile faded into something deeper, admiration. He realized then that his careless joke years ago had led to something extraordinary, something that no amount of wealth could buy: transformation. Later that night, Elena and Maria returned to their hotel balcony overlooking the Eiffel Tower. They sat in silence, watching the city sparkle. Maria turned to her daughter and whispered, "You did it." Elena smiled faintly. "No, we did it." And as the tower lights flickered across her face, she realized that her story wasn't just a dance anymore. It was a revolution, one step at a time. After the World Ballet Championship, Elena's name was known across continents. Her performance had broken records and touched hearts, turning her from a rising star into a global inspiration. Within weeks, she was invited to perform at events in London, Tokyo, and New York. Her face appeared on magazine covers, and documentaries were made about her journey from a maid's daughter to a world champion. But fame once again was not as golden as it appeared. The spotlight that had once lifted her now began to weigh her down. Every choice she made, from her costumes to her friendships, became public debate. Some accused her of forgetting her roots. Others claimed she owed her success entirely to Victor Hale. It seemed like the world had forgotten that behind the glamour was still a young woman who simply wanted to dance. One morning, as she scrolled through online comments filled with praise and hate alike, Maria entered the room holding a letter. "This came for you," she said softly. Elena opened it and froze. It was an invitation from Victor Hale himself. He wanted her to return to his mansion, the very place where it all began. The note was simple: "Come home. There's something you need to see." Elena hesitated for days. The mansion held memories, good and painful. But something in her heart told her to go. So, a week later, she found herself standing once again before the tall iron gates of Hale Manor. The same stone lions guarded the entrance, but this time, she wasn't the maid's daughter entering through the back. She arrived as an honored guest, driven by her own chauffeur. Victor greeted her at the grand staircase, a gentle smile on his face. "You came," he said. "I wasn't sure you would." She looked around the massive hall. It felt both familiar and foreign. "I had to," she replied. "This place started everything." He nodded thoughtfully. "Yes, it did, and it's time it ends something." "Too." He led her to a room she had never entered before. It was his private gallery. The walls were lined with paintings, photographs, and awards. But what caught her attention were the new portraits, all of her. dancing, smiling, lost in motion. "I've watched every one of your performances," Victor said quietly. "And I realized something. You didn't just change your life. You changed mine." Elena turned to him, confused. He continued, "I used to think money was the only way to make an impact, but you proved me wrong. You showed me that one act of kindness, one moment of belief, can create ripples that touch the entire world." She smiled softly. "You gave me a chance, Mr. Hale. That's all I needed." He shook his head. "No, Elena, you earned everything that came after. I just opened a door. You built the world beyond it." There was a pause, the kind that holds both gratitude and regret. Victor sighed. "I'm retiring soon. I've built empires, companies, foundations, but I've never built something that truly matters. That's why I called you here." He handed her a document folder. Inside were architectural drawings and papers. "The Elena Academy of Performing Arts," it read. Elena blinked in disbelief. You named a school after me?" Victor smiled. "Not just a school. A home for dreamers. For kids like you who have talent but no means. I want you to lead it, to shape it, to make it real." Tears welled in her eyes. I don't know what to say." "Say yes," he replied simply. "Because the world needs more Elenas, and you're the only one who can teach them how to rise." Elena stood in silence, emotions flooding her heart. The girl who once cleaned these floors was now being asked to build a legacy within them. "Yes," she whispered finally. "Yes." "I'll do it." Over the next several months, the mansion was transformed. The grand halls that once echoed with wealth and arrogance now filled with music, laughter, and the sound of dancing feet. Children from every background were welcomed. Orphans, street performers, poor kids with big dreams. Elena trained them personally, reminding each one that greatness begins in humility. Maria often visited, helping in the kitchen, smiling as she watched children eat at the same long dining table where she once served meals to the elite. "You've turned this place into something beautiful," she told her daughter one day. Elena laughed softly. "We both did, Victor." Two visited often, though his health began to fade one evening. As he sat in his wheelchair watching the young dancers perform, he turned to Elena and said, "I've made a lot of money in my life, but this is the first investment that's truly given me peace." Elena held his hand. "You gave us all a chance, Mr. Hale," he smiled faintly. "And you gave it meaning months later." When Victor passed away quietly in his sleep, the news spread across the world. His will revealed that he had left half his fortune to the Elena Academy, ensuring that it would continue forever, the day after his funeral. Elena gathered her students in the courtyard. "Today we dance for him," she said, "not because he was rich, but because he believed even when no one else did." As music filled the air, she led the children in a performance so heartfelt that even the sky seemed to hold its breath. Each movement was a tribute, not just to Victor Hale, but to every person who had ever been underestimated, mocked, or ignored. And when the final note faded, Elena stood beneath the golden light of the setting sun. Tears glistening in her eyes, she looked at the mansion, once a symbol of division, now a beacon of hope, and whispered, "We did it." The world had watched her rise from nothing, but what truly defined her wasn't fame or victory or wealth. It was the way she had turned pain into art, and kindness into legacy. For Elena, the dance was never just a performance. It was life itself, and she had finally danced her way into forever. Years passed, and the world continued to whisper the name Elena Rivera with admiration and awe. The Elena Academy of Performing Arts had become a sanctuary for dreamers, a place where passion mattered more than privilege, where children from forgotten corners of the world found light through rhythm and grace. Every wall of the grand mansion now told a story of transformation, of hope reborn through movement and music. But for Elena, success had never been about applause anymore. It had become about legacy, something deeper than fame, something that would last long after the music stopped. On a soft spring morning, she stood by the window of her office, gazing at the courtyard below, where dozens of children danced barefoot in the sunlight. Their laughter echoed through the air, pure and free. Maria entered quietly, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You've built a whole new world, my love," she said, handing one to her daughter. Elena smiled. "No, Mom, we built it," she replied. "Remember when we used to dream about a life where I could dance without fear? That dream became this." Maria's eyes softened. "Your father would have been proud," she whispered. Elena took her mother's hand. So would Mr. Hale. The mention of his name brought a hush between them. It had been 5 years since Victor Hale passed away, yet his presence still lingered in every corner of the academy. His portrait hung in the main hall, surrounded by photographs of students from every generation. Below it, a brass plaque read, "Belief can turn even a mockery into a miracle." That evening, as the sun melted into shades of gold and rose, the academy prepared for its biggest event of the year, the Hale Gala, a celebration of art, compassion, and legacy. It was the night when young dancers performed for donors and guests, hoping to raise funds for new scholarships. Elena oversaw every detail, from lighting to costumes, making sure the event would be perfect. As she moved backstage, she noticed a little girl sitting alone, nervously clutching her ballet slippers. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" Elena asked gently. The girl looked up, eyes brimming with tears. "I'm scared," she whispered. "What if I forget my steps?" Elena knelt down, her voice calm and kind. "You know what I once did when I was scared?" she said. "I closed my eyes and danced for the person who believed in me, not the people who doubted me." The little girl blinked. "Did it work?" Elena smiled. "It changed my life." Later that night, as the lights dimmed and the music began, Elena watched from the wings. The same little girl stepped onto the stage and danced, not perfectly, but beautifully. Each step was filled with heart, not fear. And when the crowd erupted in applause, Elena felt tears slide down her cheeks. After the performance, reporters and guests swarmed her as usual, asking questions about her success, her influence, and her next big project. But Elena didn't talk about fame or awards. She spoke about the children, about the power of one act of belief. "We were given this mansion by a man who once laughed at a maid's daughter," she said, smiling softly. "And look what it became. Proof that kindness can rewrite destiny." The crowd cheered, but for Elena, the real joy came when she looked into the audience and saw her mother clapping proudly in the front row. Later that night, when the gala ended and the guests departed, Elena walked alone through the empty halls of the mansion. The chandeliers glittered softly above her. She stopped by Victor Hale's portrait, whispering, "You were right. Belief is the greatest investment of all." Just then, Mr. Gray, Victor's old assistant, now a dear family friend, approached quietly. "He would be proud of you, Elena," he said. "He always said you were the one thing money couldn't buy." She turned to him, smiling through her tears. "He taught me something. Too, that no one is too powerful to be changed by a simple act of kindness." In the following months, Elena expanded the academy's reach, opening branches in developing countries, Kenya, India, and Brazil. She made sure every school carried the same principle. Talent should never be silenced by poverty. Her students came from everywhere, street corners, refugee camps, orphanages, and each one brought a story worth telling. Years rolled on, and the once young girl from the servants' quarters became a woman whose life touched millions. She traveled the world speaking to children and dreamers, not as a celebrity, but as someone who had once stood in their shoes. "Your beginnings don't define your endings," she often said. "The world might laugh at you, but if you keep dancing, one day they'll applaud." When Maria passed away peacefully at the age of 70, the academy held a memorial in her honor. Elena spoke softly through tears. "My mother taught me to believe before anyone else did. She cleaned floors with dignity, raised me with love, and taught me that grace isn't in wealth. It's in how you carry your heart." The students danced that night in tribute, their movements flowing like a prayer. As the years turned into decades, Elena grew older, but her spirit never dimmed. Even when her hair turned silver, she continued teaching, laughing and creating. One evening, long after the students had gone home, she sat alone in the courtyard. The fountain murmured softly, the stars glimmered overhead. She thought about the journey, the mockery, the challenge, the dance, the victory, and the love that followed. A soft wind brushed her face, and she smiled, whispering to the night, "We did it." In that quiet moment, she felt as though Victor and Maria were both there, watching, proud and at peace. The Elena Academy continued long after she was gone. Each new generation of dancers carried her story in their hearts. A tale of a girl who turned humiliation into art. A maid's daughter who made the world remember that no dream is too small when danced with courage. And so even when her music faded, her rhythm remained, us in every heartbeat, in every step, in every child who dared to believe. The girl who once danced for a billionaire had ended up dancing for the world, and in doing so, she had given it something eternal: hope.